Hey guys, I'm recording this actually Thursday right after school, so hopefully this will be ready for you and all set up by tomorrow. So we're going to wrap up energy and move on to photosynthesis. So we're going to be bouncing around a little bit in your packet, and I apologize for that. Apparently I made a misstaple. So first I'd like you to turn to page 20 of your note packet. We're going to go over the different types of energy that we're focusing on this unit. Now we talked about energy in terms of ATP, which is the charged battery, and ADP, which is the drained battery. And we also talked about energy in terms of ATP and glucose. ATP being the perfect size, it's complex but it's easy to break, and glucose, which is great for storage but too big and too powerful for a lot of everyday things. So we're going to go over the three types of energy. So we have three main types of energy we're focusing on in this unit. You will need to be able to know the differences between the different types. The first one's the most important one. It's electromagnetic energy, or sunlight. It's a source of all energy. In photosynthesis, we turn electromagnetic into chemical, which is our next type. Chemical energy is energy that's stored in the bonds that hold molecules together. So anything that has a molecule has energy stored in it. Glucose and ATP tend to have a lot. Mechanical energy is energy available to do work. So when ATP breaks and loses that energy, that usually ends up converting into something that's doing a job, like mechanical. So this would be like mitochondria working. Oh, well, no, not the mitochondria working. Apologize, not that. It would be like riding a bike, the cell going through its normal functions, things like that. So that's your example. So sunlight for electromagnetic, glucose, ATP, and biking, blinking your eyes, your heart beating, your cells going through the normal processes for mechanical. Now we're going to move on to photosynthesis. This is one of our big chunks in this unit that we need to learn about. I'd like you to take a minute and turn to page 13. And we're going to start talking about photosynthesis. Now, what organisms do this? Well, as we know, anything that makes its own food is called an autotroph, and we also call them producers, so they are self-feeders. So plants, some bacteria, some protists, all photosynthesize in some capacity. Now, some autotrophs and producers do use chemicals to make their own food, like chemosynthesis, but we're here focusing on photosynthesis for this process. So where this occurs? Well, this occurs in the chloroplast, and make sure you're filling all of this out as you go. So the chloroplast is made up of a bunch of different parts. We have a double membrane on the outside, stroma or sticky liquid on the inside, and the thylakoids, which are these individual discs that when you stack them together are called grana. So these are the main parts of photosynthesis of the chloroplast, which are part of photosynthesis. Apologize if I mess up a little bit. I am fighting a horrific migraine, which is part of the reason I'm out for class today. So bear with me, I might mess up a little bit. My brain is a little wonky. So these are the main parts of the chloroplast you need to know. You need to know it has a double membrane, a stroma, thylakoids, and grana. Those are the parts. They're like an organelle within organelles. Now there are two main steps to photosynthesis. Step one is the light-dependent step. It happens in the thylakoids, or the stacks of grana. I always think of them as like stacks of pancakes. It's like little green pancake stacks. In this step, you take water and light, and you produce oxygen and more water from that. So this is where you get the oxygen from plants to breathe. So this is where a lot of that oxygen is produced. So step one is in the stacks, takes water and light, and out comes a little bit of water. There's always a little bit of water when you build molecules. So there's always going to be a little left over, but not nearly as much as what's going in. And you get oxygen coming out. The second step is the light independent step. Now, if you notice light dependent, that means it depends on light, so it needs that electromagnetic energy. But light independent, there's no light needed for this. We're done with the light. So this happens in the stroma. The stroma is kind of like that syrup that sits on those stacks of little weird green pancakes. It's kind of like the cytoplasm of the chloroplast. In the light independent step, we take the products from the first, and we take the CO2, and we make glucose. So some of the water from that first and some of that hydrogen gets mixed with that CO2 to make glucose and a little leftover water. Now, the thylakoids themselves contain chlorophyll, which contain pigments that collect light, and they bounce back green light. They also have things called carotenoids, which bounce back orange, reds, and yellows, and we'll get into that more later. But the thylakoids hold chlorophyll, which captures light and allows the light-dependent step to happen. In the light-independent step, we're solely in the stroma, the sticky, sugary syrup, and there's a reason I say that, is because we produce sugar. The stroma quite literally is the sticky syrup on top of the little green pancakes. So part 2 is CO2 enters, glucose, and water comes out. And like I said, the water coming out of both of these is very, very minuscule. There's actually a lot more water going in than coming out. So we're going to ignore that in terms of looking at the entire chemical equation. But those are the two main parts. And now you need to know both of these steps, what goes in, what comes out, and the different structures. I will say the light independent step also has a second name, and that is the Calvin cycle, or the C cycle, because carbon goes in, carbon comes out. So I would also put down that that is also known as the Calvin cycle. Now, in this process, just moving this a little bit so you can see it better, the energy that we start with is electromagnetic because it comes from the sun. The energy we end with is glucose, which is a form of chemical energy. As I reminded, the light dependent happens in the thylakoids, and many of the thylakoids stacked in that little pancake stack are called grana or granum. And the thylakoids contain chlorophyll, carotenoids, all those things that capture light. That's why we call it the light-dependent step. We need light for this to happen. So, as I stated, there are pigments in this. Like that's what also gives chloroplasts their green color, is because of the pigment chlorophyll. Because every little bit of light that's reflected gives color. So, for instance, if you are wearing a blue shirt, the shirt is not actually blue. The shirt is soaking in every single color except for blue and bouncing it back at everything else, including our eyes. So chlorophyll takes in every single color except for green, and so bounces green back. So when we look at a chloroplast, it looks green. That's why when we look at plants in the summer, they look green. Carotenoids soak up everything except for red, oranges, purples, and yellows. So that's why in the fall, carotenoids are actually more prevalent in the fall. We see those colors because they soak up all the others and they bounce back those bright, vibrant colors. The equation and everything has been written down for you at the bottom. So the equation for photosynthesis is below. So you need carbon dioxide, light, and water. You get out oxygen, a little bit of water too, and sugar. Because that's the goal of photosynthesis, to make sugar for plants. Put it together, you get the equation. This is an endothermic reaction because it stores. This is anabolic because it builds. And this is dehydration synthesis because to build the sugar you have to remove water. Like I said, I'm going to jump around a little bit, and I apologize for that. So if you wouldn't mind jumping to page 16 now, I'll go through 14 and 15 later. Just go ahead and jump to page 16 I'll probably go through 14 and 15 on Tuesday. We have a lab on Monday. So now we need to look at things that affect photosynthesis. There's both external and internal things that will affect it and how fast it goes. The first thing is light. As photosynthesis increases, with more light, it will keep going until the maximum rate is reached. Do you remember learning about enzymes and reaching that sort of stable rate of reaction because everything was busy? That we're going to see a little bit of that throughout these different examples. But when there's more light, photosynthesis is going to increase. That's pretty obvious. If you have more access to one of the things you need, you'll be able to do more until you reach a maximum rate. So in this case, all of the pigments are busy after a certain point, and they can't do any more. So light will increase photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide will increase photosynthesis because carbon dioxide is also a reactant needed for the process. Again, it will increase until everything is busy. All the enzymes are done and they can't go any faster. Temperature will also increase photosynthesis up to a point. Because after a certain point, it gets too hot. The enzymes start to break down and denature, and then photosynthesis will drop off. So it'll increase with warm weather up until a point until the plant starts to be harmed by the temperature and the enzymes unravel. Flip to the next page. Water. Water is one that will affect photosynthesis as well. The more water you have, the faster it can go. That's the last of the reactants. You have light, CO2, and water. It will increase photosynthesis until all the enzymes are busy. Oxygen actually has an interesting effect. Oxygen will increase as photosynthesis increases to a certain point. This is kind of a reverse reaction. Because usually the higher the rate of photosynthesis, the more oxygen you're getting. But eventually, if there's too much oxygen being produced, the oxygen will block the enzymes, and the enzymes will start trying to use the O2 instead of the CO2. So it kind of becomes a competitive inhibitor when you produce too much. It's kind of a way of the plant to say, stop, I've done enough. I need more CO2 before I can move on. I need to get rid of this oxygen. So oxygen will increase as photosynthesis increases. However, if there's too much oxygen, it will act as a competitive inhibitor and block those enzymes. And then there is one, I jumped ahead. There is one that is internal, and that's chlorophyll. As I said, this is a pigment that captures light. So the more chlorophyll, the more photosynthesis. And the more photosynthesis going on, the more chlorophyll is going to be made to try and capture more light. So if you're in a very sunny area, you're going to capture a ton of light. This will continue to increase until, again, things are at a maximum, all the chlorophyll and enzymes are busy, and we're good. That being said, I'm going to stop with the notes there. I have a little more to talk about on pages 14 and 15, but I will get to that on Tuesday, so not to overload you with notes. Just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, there is a lovely, lovely photosynthesis ed puzzle from the Amoeba Sisters you need to complete once you've completed this in the ATP activity. If you do not get to it during class, the Photosynthesis Amoeba Sisters ed puzzle is homework. Due by Monday. By class, not after class, not at the end of the day. It's due by class on Monday. All right, I'm going to sign off here. I should be back on Monday. Wish my headache well. Have a great weekend, guys.